segueing in to the way we talk about worship. So one of the big things when you go to a church, if you read that book, Top 10 Mistakes Leaders Make, you're going to see one of the top 10 mistakes is not understanding the corporate culture. And every church has its own corporate culture, just like every company does. And ultimately, in a long term, a church is going to take on the personality of the pastor. Now, that's both a good thing and a scary thing. I mean, look at your personality. Is this the personality you want a church to have? Well, it's going to over the course of time. And this is why you need sanctification, because you don't want them taking on your bad traits, right? So you really need to walk in the Spirit so that as they become more like you over time, they're taking on your good qualities. And you really want to make sure that you've got those qualities, that you care about people and you're welcoming and loving and all those things that you should be. So part of their corporate culture is expressed in the way they sing. When we talk about worship, now I do agree that preaching is the central act of worship. But a lot of our church is shaped by the way we sing and we worship in singing. And frankly, the statistics show that people make a decision in the first 10 minutes whether or not they're ever coming back to that church. So a visitor comes, they've decided before you ever get up to preach whether or not they're coming back. They've already been made to feel welcome or not, and they like the music or they don't. So if they've not been welcomed and no one's talked to them, then you got bad music. Before you ever get up to preach, you might be Adrian Rogers. They've already decided before you're up, we're not coming back here. These people don't like us. They don't want us. So one of the things you've got to do is you've got to work on that culture of the church. Is it welcoming? How do you treat visitors? And since you're new, you better than anybody can look at it with fresh eyes and see what we're doing. And you just sort of got to talk to people about this. I told Buck Run when I came, look, we set a standard and a spirit in all we do. So at our old building, one day I took some of our leaders on a walk around the building. And so you would come in the lobby, and then there was a stairwell, had to go through a door and up a stairwell to go upstairs to where we had the kids. And under that stairwell was all kinds of just junk. I mean, it's just like we didn't have a lot of storage space, and so they just piled junk under there. It was visible. You walk through that door, take your kids up there and look at that. Here's boxes of old Sunday school literature and people's leftover Bibles and umbrellas. And it's all of it just junk there. Now look, if you've been coming to Buck Run for 40 years, you don't care about that junk. That you don't even notice that junk. It means nothing to you. But if you're a visitor, you're taking your kids up there, you see that. It's like, do I really trust these people with my kid? I mean, you're making this connection. So you've got to look at stuff like that and say, okay, how do people see us? And if there's stuff that we can fix easily and cheaply, just clean up. I mean, I was a church janitor while I was in seminary, and man, if I had to do it myself, clean up the area where people are taking their kids, I'm going to do it myself, but it's going to get done. Things like that you see are an impediment to growth that says to visitors, we don't want you. So one of the things that I would do, and if I were new in a church, is I'd find my friendliest people. And I've always done this. So who are the friendliest people in your church? Who are the people that are most welcoming and just don't meet strangers? You're going to put them on the door, man. I need you to be out in the parking lot. I need you to be on the door. Now, I know you can go to some churches where you don't even have any visitors to do this for. I'd still do it. I'd at least get my people in the mentality for when we do have a visitor, here's the way we're going to treat them. And you need to start looking at that corporate culture. Now, you don't want to do it in a way that is demeaning to your people. You can't do it like, you people are, nobody wants to come here and be with you. You guys are not welcoming. You can't be negative. You got to be positive. Hey, You know, man, God's blessed us with such a great fellowship. And why wouldn't anybody want to come be a part of this? Well, we got to make it easy for people to come. We want to be inviting and welcoming and warm. And so here's some things, here's just some real practical things we can do. And you just get them to start thinking in those terms. And so that you're not rebuking them for doing things wrong. You're not taking away, you're adding to. Now, when it comes to the worship, uh, sometimes there are hard decisions to make. Like if you go to a place, and you'll face this a lot. I had it my first church when I went to seminary. While I was in seminary, I got called to be the pastor at First Baptist Church in Marion, Arkansas. There was a wonderful older man that led the singing, and that's what he was, the song leader. He wasn't a worship leader or a worship pastor. He was the song leader, and he would get up, and often he'd go, "Okay, who's got a favorite? What number? What song would you like us to sing?" 311. Okay, 311, and we'd sing 311 because it was just that was everybody's favorite, and it just went all over me. But now this guy's not paid, right? He's a sweet, wonderful guy. People love him. I've got to deal with this sensitively, gently. So you know what my first move was? I mean, I was there a little while, and I got a sense of how he would react if I got like a seminary student to come and be a true worship pastor. So I know if he's against it, I can't pull it off because then he looks like a victim, right? And I can't afford him to be a victim. But if he's for it, then I'm going to have him sell the church on it. And so this is where I had to gently broach the subject with him. "Bob, do you like leading the singing?" "Well, yeah, I like it, but I do it because really nobody else will do it. And, I'm happy to do it, but if you got something else in mind, I'm good with that." I mean, he went there first. And I said, "What do you think about?" "I think that'd be great." And then I said, "Man, you've been wonderful and you've been so faithful. And trust me, I'd rather have a guy like you who's faithful than somebody with a lot of pizzazz and talent and all that I can't trust or who doesn't really walk with the Lord. So, man, I'm grateful for you. But I was thinking if we got, say, a seminary student from mid-America to come in here, somebody that's a musician, plays piano, guitar, could lead choir, and develop some new groups and things like that. What do you think about that?" "I think that'd be great." I said, "Now, I wouldn't do this if this would hurt or wound you in any way. I wouldn't do it." "No, I think it'd be wonderful." "Well, let me ask you, would you be willing to make the suggestion?" "Yeah, I would." And it happened. And before long, we had Alan Lewis, who actually came on our staff full time. And I had help, and it took our church up a notch, man. In the first 8 months, I think we baptized 80 people. And I was only there 22 months, and the church doubled in size from about 150 to over 300. And changing that was a big part of it. But I wouldn't have split the church over it. I wasn't going to force Bob out of leading the singing. I had to sell him on it. And that's the thing you've got to do. The people that you are seeking to replace or whatever, if they're good, godly people, you got to be sensitive to them. If they're, every now and then you're in a place where these are infants spiritually, when they've been claiming to be believers for 40 years, and they got to have their way, and it's about power. I'm not quite so sensitive with those people. Those people, I'm your huckleberry. It's like I got a totally different posture with those guys. But I've not had many of those. It's usually guys like Bob at First Marion, who's a wonderful, godly, sweet guy, not able to do what I want him to do, need him to do, but I'm not going to hurt him. I'm not going to wound him to get him out of the way. I've got to work with him and get him to have the idea and him to make the suggestion, and then everybody will be on board because their concerns will be, well, will this hurt Bob's feelings? Well, if Bob's the one saying we need to do it, that's okay. That's taken care of. So you've got to respect that corporate culture. Now, sometimes the corporate culture is quirky and weird. I love to tell this story. This happened to Tom Rayner. People forget that. I run into guys all the time who say, I remember that story you told about when you went over in Indiana and preached. It's not me. It's Tom Rayner. But Tom Rayner, one time when he was a student here, I think, went to Indiana and he preached, filled in a pulpit, and he got up to preach. And it was a little church, and a lady in the back goes, "Turn on Jesus." Now, Tom thought that was an odd encouragement, but it was a white church. He thought that's strange, but all he needed to do was just start preaching. He started preaching. The lady, again, goes, "Turn on Jesus." And Tom's still trying to figure this out. He just keeps preaching. And she finally goes, "Young man, I said, turn on Jesus." And he just stopped. He said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean." She's behind you. And he turns around, and there's this plaster of Paris head of Jesus back here with a light bulb in it stuck in his head. And their custom was every time the preacher got up to preach, he turned the light bulb on in Jesus' head, and then he preached. And it had taken on spiritual significance for this dear sister. And really the whole church, you can't preach without turning on Jesus. Well, there's that kind of stuff that you're going to want to get them out of. It's just so bad, and it's so provincial that it doesn't contribute. But you'd be a fool to go in there and do that right off the bat. You've got to be there enough to get their trust and to sort of get rid of those things. So worship is one of those areas, and if they're doing it badly, you got to change. You're just not going to grow. You're not going to reach people if you're doing worship badly. Now, how do you change it? Well, one of the things I do is I emphasize how preaching is the central act of worship, and that we're worshiping as we preach. The preaching of the word is inherently worshipful. And there, as such, now listen carefully to this. I want you to get this principle. The pastor is the worship leader. The pastor is de facto the worship leader. And that's true whether he's sitting up on the platform or sitting on the front row, whether he's the guy leading the singing or he can't carry a tune in a bucket. The pastor is the worship leader because your church is going to get their cues for how to worship from the way the pastor worships. So if you are uptight, they're uptight. If you're free in worship, they're going to learn to be free in worship. If you come in and you sit on the front row while somebody else is leading the worship, but you're over there looking at your Bible and your notes, guess what you're saying to everybody else? You're saying that's really not important. It irritates me to death to go someplace and see a guy looking at his notes before he gets up to preach. Dude, if you aren't ready by the time that service starts, those few minutes on the front row aren't going to help you at all. You need to be ready so that you can come in and you can truly lead in worship. I ask these guys, they never see me. I don't look at my notes when I'm sitting on the front row during the worship service. I mean, that's done. I'm ready to go. I'm participating in the worship. And if you're not acting like worship is important, it's not going to be important. So you are the de facto worship leader. And it really does no good for you to complain about the way the song leader or the choir director or worship leader is doing it if you aren't even participating. So you as the pastor need to be all in, and you need to worship, and you need to free them up to worship. Tell you a little story. When I was pastor of Ashland Avenue, it was during a season when the Lord was just saving a lot of people. Our folks were leading a lot of people to the Lord, and somebody, I don't even remember who it was, led to Christ this couple. She was a lounge singer in Lexington. Now, I'd seen her name on marquees all over town. The Continental and places like that, it would say, have her name up here for 2-week engagement. She was local, but she was really well known locally as a good singer, and her husband led her band. Somebody in our church led them to the Lord, and they were baptized. And nobody said to them, you can't sing in lounges anymore. But over the first couple of months of their saved life, they were like, we don't fit anymore. This doesn't feel right. And she quit. She said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't keep doing that. And so she came, Chuck Henderson was my associate pastor, and we were between ministers of music, and Chuck was leading, and her name was Melody, and she came to Chuck, and she said, I've sung professionally for 20 years, and I'd like to sing. And he said, okay, Sunday after next, we'll put you down, and you sing. And Chuck didn't bother to ask her what she was singing. And I will never forget this. John, were you there? Yeah. So the choir's gone down, and I'm sitting there on the platform, and Melody comes out, this last special before I preach. She comes out, and the first thing you notice is what she's wearing. Now, it wasn't immodest. It was super flashy, like a lounge singer wears. And she comes out, and the music starts. And it goes, dum, 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 dum. I'm sitting over there, and I'm going, that sounds like Stand By Me. And she's moving, man. She's moving. She's doing her thing. And suddenly she goes, when the night has come. I'm going, yeah, that's Stand By Me. The only word she changed in the whole thing, she got to the chorus. She goes, so Jesus, Jesus, stand by me. Whoa, won't you stand by me? Now, at this point, I know there is not one eye in the whole place looking at her. Who are they looking at? They're looking at me. Now, this is Ashland Avenue, ultra-conservative, right? Pulled out of the SBC because of Southern Seminary's liberal bent back in the 70s. And, they're ultra-conservative. And here's this gal up there dressed like a lounge singer singing Stand By Me. And I know, I'm sitting there, and here's what I know. I'm going, on the inside, I'm going, I cannot believe this is happening in the pulpit of the historic Ashland Avenue Baptist Church. On the outside, I'm going, I'm grinning big, and I'm into it, and I've got a big smile on my face. And why am I doing that? Because I know this is like when my boys were little, them bringing me one of their toys and saying, here, Daddy, and they want to give me their toy. I don't want their toy, but do I take their toy? I do, because that's what they have to offer. Them giving me their toy is an expression of their love for me. And Melody is a new believer. And for years, she has sung songs about lovers and love, but now she's fallen in love with the lover of her soul. And this is what she has to offer. And she changes the lyrics just enough to say, it's about you, Jesus. Why would I rob her of that? Right? She's going to grow. She's going to deepen. She's going to eventually know the difference. But right now, she's a baby Christian. who's offering something to the Lord, and I am not going to wound or hurt her. And you, as the pastor, have to know that. You're the worship leader. You set the tone, you set the spirit, and you free people up. And if I had acted uptight, and by the way, man, I had a church full of uptight people at that point. We'd had about 70 people had come from another church that made Ashland Avenue look liberal. And they'd all left there and come to Ashland Avenue, had them in mass. And it was hard, like retraining those people and getting them out of that legalism. And there was enough of them to really mount an insurrection. If I had acted uptight at all, it's like it says sick 'em to a bulldog. When you bring tension in the room, buddy, it's in the room, and you then can't control it. You got to make sure you're not bringing tension in the room. And that's just a key part of leadership. And the times I have failed at it, I have failed spectacularly and allowed tension to come in the room. But when you just stay loose and like, this is not a big deal, you don't make it a big deal, then they're okay with it. And if someone acts upset with you, you go, oh, man, look, just think about it. It's not like we're suddenly going to start singing Stand By Me. Understand this for what it is. We're okay. I'm glad you're concerned, but we're all right. You just keep that kind of an attitude. And you lead. Now, as you can effect change, I've got a few rules I want to give you about worship. And so like if you're in a place where, they use the hymnals and they sing old songs and they do it badly, how do you transition them? Let me just give you a few rules. Number one is, if I get these in order, make sure that you never make them feel like you're taking anything away from them, only that you're adding to. Okay? That's just an important rule across the board. Because if you make them feel like you've taken something away, they're going to miss it, and they're going to mourn it, and they're going to gripe about it. So it would be a foolish thing for you to say, you know what, we're not going to sing these old hymns anymore. Why would you say that? Because we don't stop singing them because they're old. I mean, what we don't want to do is sing bad songs anymore. And by the way, there are lots of new bad songs too, aren't there? So you make the case that it's about theology and we want to do it well, but we're going to learn some new songs. So in addition to the songs that we know and love, we're going to learn some new songs. God is raising up people today the same way he raised up Fanny Crosby. And she wrote so many wonderful hymns that we love to sing. Well, I love the songs of the Gettys and Matt Papa, others that have written great stuff. We want to learn some of these too. So you don't make it sound like we're taking away, only that we're adding to. Secondly, you never ask them to sing something that they've not heard at least 3 times before. So in other words, if you'll have a soloist or a small group, duet, trio, quartet, whatever, the choir, sing a song before you ask them to sing it. So you don't say, hey, we're introducing a new song, listen to that. You just have your group sing it. So they've never sung Before the Throne of God I Stand. You have a trio sing it. People say, boy, that was a beautiful song. You have the trio sing it again 2 weeks later. You have them sing it a third time, and then during that one, you maybe print the lyrics out in the bulletin or put them up on the screen. So as, and the trio says, hey, sing this along with us. Okay, now they're hearing it. They're not put on the spot. It's not one of their songs, but they're invited to sing it with the group singing it. About the third time they've heard it, it's not unfamiliar anymore. Look, old people don't like unfamiliar stuff. It makes them feel dumb. It makes them feel old. They stumble over the word. Nobody wants to feel like they're old. Nobody wants to feel irrelevant. You throw a bunch of new stuff at them, it frightens them. Oh, now you're making me feel old and irrelevant. So if you teach it to them without them even knowing you're teaching it to them, then when they sing it, they're not on the spot. they're singing it with the people who are singing it. So it's not the burden of singing, doing it right. It's not on their shoulders. Now the next week, you say, "Hey, everybody liked that song so much, we're going to sing that too. Here are the words." And okay, now we've heard this before. It's no longer terribly unfamiliar. So let them hear it a few times before you sing it. Number 3, never introduce more than one unfamiliar element in any service. So if you teach them one, don't teach them two in the same service. Make sure there's only one unfamiliar thing in that service. That way they don't leave going, "Well, I didn't know any of those songs they sang." See, there are certain conversations in their head you want to make sure never get voice. And if you put too many unfamiliar elements in there, they're going to over-characterize it and over-represent it. So just one thing. One new element, no more. Number 4, do everything with excellence. So if you make a change, don't make it until you can do it well. Do everything with excellence so that the change is so obviously better. No one can misrepresent it or discount it. All right? You're doing it well. Number 5, do old songs, but with fresh touches and new arrangements. There's just a lot of, like, listen to Norton Hall Band, the way they do stuff, okay? And do that. So that way nobody's saying, "Well, I miss the old hymns." No, we love the old hymns. We're just doing them better. And there are some old things. I recently held a revival down in West Kentucky, about 10 miles from where I grew up. Oh, I had forgotten how bad the music was where I grew up. I mean, we're doing shape note stuff, and some of it, it's funny. People make fun of contemporary music for being so repetitious. A lot of that old stuff was just every bit as repetitious as that, just over and over. Looking for a city where we'll never die. I mean, I just don't know how many times we can sing "We Look Forward to Heaven." And there's no real gospel there. It's just like we're just looking forward to heaven. And there's an awful lot of old songs that are like that. Really don't say anything. And some say nothing, like we actually sang "Whispering Hope." Now, some of you probably don't even know that song, "Whispering Hope." I think Hank Williams sang that. And it's just, there's no gospel content in it whatsoever. But the topper was the pastor asked me to preach out of the King James Version because he said, "I'm afraid my song leader will be offended if you use any of these modern translations." Well, no problem. I'll preach out of the King James Version. It's what's in my head because I grew up on it anyway. So no problem. And then the song leader one night with his guitar sang a song. I'm not making this up. "I Like Old People." That was the name of the song. And there wasn't a word. I think the word God appeared in there one time. But nothing about Jesus, nothing about salvation, nothing about the Bible. Just, "I like old people. Old people are nice." And okay, we like old people and we use the King James Version. Let's all go home. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So there's new bad stuff. There's old bad stuff. We want to do good stuff. We want it to have a theological content, and we want to do it well. So we do it with excellence, and we take old stuff, we put it in new arrangements, so people aren't feeling like we're displacing them. And I don't think I would ever say, "Okay, we're getting rid of the hymnals." But I would put lyrics up on a screen. So they want to turn to the song in the hymnal. I will tell you, as a musician, I lament that what we've lost is any kind of harmonic singing. No harmony in our singing anymore. Nobody's singing alto, or soprano, and tenor, and bass. Everybody's just singing the lead. I do miss that, but um, songs are coming out so quickly now. You're not going to, if you only sing what's in the hymnal, you'd have to buy new hymnals every 2 years. But I wouldn't take hymnals away. We only did it at Buck Run when we made the move into our new building, and we didn't put anything on the seats to hold the hymnals. So the old building had hymnals in the pews, even though we didn't use them. We didn't throw them away either. We just left them there. Anybody wants to use them can use them. We always put the lyrics up. But the worship war is not worth splitting the church over. I'll tell you my other strong feeling here. I heard Alistair Begg say this one time, and he said, anytime I go to a church and I see a sign out front that says a traditional service at 9 o'clock, contemporary service at 11, he said, I can't see that as anything other than a failure of leadership. The first time he said that, I thought, that's a little harsh. But the more I thought about it, I think it's true. Now, I'm not saying it's always wrong. Sometimes it might be the best a leader can do, but it's still a failure in leadership. Because to me, the real leadership is to get your church collectively valuing the things that matter. So I'm going to tell you, even by experience, I think when you split it up like that, you're going to end up with two churches, and one of them will inevitably feel cheated by the other. So my advice to you, I think if you follow these steps and you really be the leader as the pastor, I think you can keep them all together. Because I want younger people knowing great, grand hymns of the faith. I want them to learn those things. But I want my older people seeing what God is doing through some of these great contemporary hymn writers. And ultimately, I want it all being about the praise and worship of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I want to get rid of anything that doesn't successfully do that. Whether it's shine, Jesus, shine, which I really don't know what that means. Or looking for a city. I like old people. You can find bad stuff either way. I want everything we do to be evaluated theologically, and I want it to be done with musical excellence. Let me move on. Oh, the other thing I would tell you, I've written down here this phrase, seamless service. You really want one thing to flow into another in the service. I would urge you to, even though you may not be broadcast on the internet, you really don't want dead airtime. Just dead airtime is not a good thing. So one person is sitting there, like song leader sits down, and then your soloist comes up, and the piano player has to put everything up there, and then the soloist nods to him, I'm ready for you to start playing, and they start playing. It's just too many hinges there. It's disjointed. You want one thing to flow right into the next, and you really need to build the service that way so that there's not dead air time, and we're not all, again, part of worship, I think, is getting people to be focused on Christ, and the degree to which all this other stuff is happening takes the focus off of what you're singing and puts it on. I wonder why, the piano player always needs that. Why do they always nod over, tell them they're ready? I mean, don't they know when they get up there? What do you need to do to get ready? All those conversations go over in your head. That's not what I want people thinking about. So I really want one thing to flow into the next without hesitation, without delay, without dead air time, just as though we were being broadcast on the radio. Dead air time on the radio is a killer. You don't want anybody turning on their radio station and hearing nothing. Well, that's the same way in the worship service. You want a seamless service. The other thing that I strive for, and we're without a worship leader at buck run right now. And if you know anybody I should talk to, let me know. And we've got a guy at church that's wonderful, and he's filling in, but he's not what a guy who does that for a living would be. But I want everything to flow one thing into the next. You want to go for a seamless service. You don't want dead air time. You really want it to be participatory. Oh, here's the other thing. I want it to feel spontaneous, though it almost certainly should never be. Now that's true with my preaching. That's true with our worship, everything. You want it to have this spontaneous feel. But when it is, it's almost never good. So spontaneity is a wonderful feeling, but in reality, it rarely is a good thing. Usually when things happen unplanned and off the cuff, that's when we say things we shouldn't say or do things that are stupid. But you want it to have that feeling. So sometimes, like I see on the order of worship that we're singing this song, I love, let's say that I'm preaching on the thief on the cross. And I want us to sing that verse, the dying thief rejoiced to see I found his day. I might make it sound like, hey, John, lead us in that second verse of there is a fountain filled with blood about the dying thief. Now, if I do that on the spur of the moment, that's not a good thing. But if I tell John, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to throw it to you at a certain spot and tell you to lead us in it, it feels spontaneous, but it's not. And that way everybody's ready for it, all my musicians, my leader. So you want to think through a service ahead of time. What elements do we need to put in here? What can I do that makes it feel and look spontaneous, but it's not? We plan spontaneity, right? That's an important part of worship leadership, I think, in that seamless service. People ask me about using multimedia. I would just say, both in worship and in the sermon, I don't want to do anything that distracts. So if people are thinking more about this video of wind blowing a meadow and the flowers in a meadow behind me while we're singing How Great Is Our God, if it distracts, I don't want it. If it's okay, if it doesn't really, maybe it helps, I don't know. I'm going to evaluate it on that basis, though. I'm not going to do anything that distracts. And if in a preaching or in anything that we do, if it's not going to work right, I'd rather preach without anything behind me. I can do that. I don't need slides going up of my points behind me. If that's being done badly, if they're coming in ahead of me or behind me, instead of when I say them, I just soon cut it, because everybody feels the tension. Everybody go, oh man, the guy back there is screwing up. And again, what's happening? The conversation in their head is not about the sermon. It's about, oh man, he's going to be ticked at that guy. How does he not know? He hadn't said that yet. I mean, you're thinking all those things. I don't want that. This is my big point. Don't do anything until you can do it with excellence. If you can't do it with excellence, it's better to do without it. So I'm not against multimedia in worship and preaching and any of that, but I'm saying be honest with whether or not it's helping you, whether or not it's contributing or detracting. And if it's detracting and distracting, man, I'd rather sing a cappella than to sing with a piano that's desperately out of tune. Just look at, evaluate all your media like that.